On this edition of Larry the Golf Guy, we talk with Mark Cannizzaro. Mark has been writing about golf and other sports at the New York Post since 1993. And although he was hired originally as the New York Jets beat writer, which he did for 17 years before transitioning to more of being a columnist, he's covered golf since the very beginning of his time at the Post. And in that time, he's covered well over 100 majors and a number of Ryder Cups, every one since 1997, and really knows the golf world well. So we talk with Mark about what majors have been the most notable for him, what the public doesn't know about the Masters, as he wrote a book on the Masters. And then we get into his thoughts on the overall careers of both Tiger and Phil, since having started in 1993 covering golf, he's really had a front row seat for both of their careers. And then we talk a little bit, as we talk about Phil, with what's going on today with Live. Mark just covered the Live event in northern New Jersey at Bedminster last week. And then also his thoughts on Brian Rolapp's plans for the PGA Tour and much more. So really a fun conversation, and I think you'll enjoy it. So up next on this edition of Larry the Golf Guy, Mark Cannizzaro of the New York Post. Well, welcome to another edition of Larry the Golf Guy, and I'm so pleased today to welcome to the podcast Mark Cannizzaro, who has been doing the golf beat and a few other things, football, the Jets for the New York Post for a very long time. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Larry.
So, as I like to often do for our listeners, just to give people a little context and talk about kind of how you got started in the business. And I know you grew up in the New York area, I think Port Chester, raised in Fairfield, went to Ithaca College, and I know you played a little sports there, some soccer and tennis from what I could see.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, kind of, when did you first think about saying to yourself, hey, this sports journalism may be something I'd like to do?
Well, it starts with sports, period, Larry. My dad was a commuter, Metro North train commuter in and out of the city in the garment industry when I was younger, and back in the day, the New York Post used to it published all day. It was 24 hours. So if news broke, now I mean nowadays, like out where you are, the LA Times, you get it on your doorstep, and or whoever gets the LA Times anymore, I should say, or any newspaper for that matter. Unfortunately, and I'm not making fun because I'm living it, but you get it on the doorstep in the morning, and you get yesterday's news kind of thing, right? So. My dad would always pick up a New York Post at Grand Central Station
Hmm.
before you get on the train,
Hmm.
and it was one of the things I remember about it was because we published all, I say we, it wasn't we back then, but the Post published all day. On the back page of the sports section back then, if you remember, I don't know if you're a baseball fan or not, but Wrigley Field used to never have lights until I don't know
Right, of
15,
course. Yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah,
So there was
absolutely.
always day games, and I guess now when I look back on it, it was probably a look at us. We're publishing at 3 in the afternoon, in the middle of a Cubs game. There would literally be the innings running line score at the bottom of our back page, wherever the
Wow.
Cub game was at that moment of
Wow.
publishing,
Wow.
or I should say press run. So it might have been like bottom of the sixth, Cubs up 3-2, and that would always be at the bottom of the page. So anyway, that was one of the things I remembered about the Post. But mostly, I would basically box my younger brother out, when my dad got home, and tear the Post out of his hands and just devour it in the sports section. I mean, grew up a Yankee fan. They used to have the
Yeah.
Yankee batting, the statistics
Oh
before you
yeah.
can go online and look at it yourself on
Oh
ESPN.
yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that was what I did. I mean, I was literally, it was obviously in my blood since I was a kid. I was just always a newspaper junkie and sports statistics and all that kind of thing. So, and as you referenced, I played a little bit of sports. I was not any good. I was a halfway decent tennis player. I played on the tennis team in college. I like to say I was on the soccer team at Ithaca in college. I didn't play that much. I played a lot of JV and a couple of cups of coffee on varsity, but I always was into it. But I also knew I was not going to be a professional in sports. I was not going to be able to play professional tennis. which I would have loved to have done, but wasn't good enough. And the next best thing kind of was trying to get into sports writing. I mean, that really is kind of what it was. And even before the writing element of it, because I was never a really good student in school, mostly because I didn't apply myself that well, I suppose. But I thought maybe I would get into sports statistics because I was always devouring, the Yankees batting and the
Oh,
statistics and
you
box
and I have
scores.
a lot in common. I grew up in Connecticut, a long lifetime Yankee fan, and even with my geographical travels, I'm still a diehard Yankees fan. So
Yeah,
I
so
remember those days where Roy, Horace Clark, Roy
Roy
White,
White.
those
Well, that's our era. Thurman Munson,
yeah,
Ron Blomberg,
exactly.
the first DH, and
First DH,
um,
absolutely, exactly.
that was my childhood, and I thought, okay, well, how can I parlay that into a career? And my first thought was to be some sort of statistician. I remember WPIX was the one
Yeah.
11 they broadcast the Yankees games, and at
Oh,
the
the
at the
Scooter, Messer, Bill White,
yeah.
all of them, absolutely.
So at the end of the broadcast, they would always say our statistician was, whomever,
Right.
Bill
That's
Smith
right.
or whatever.
Right.
And I'm like, well, maybe I can be that dude, and do all the stats. And that way I'm in the stadium, I'm there for free, I don't have to pay, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
So that kind of started a little bit, and I know I'm going a little bit
No,
down a rabbit
this
hole,
is great. That's so good.
but I have an aunt and uncle that had a place out in Amagansett, out in Eastern Long Island.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was like a kind of a seminal moment for me because I was out visiting them right before I was about to go to college. My freshman year of college, I actually went to New Orleans, down a place called Loyola University.
Hmm.
I ended up transferring to Ithaca and was there my last 3 years. But decided to go to Loyola, and I had no intention whatsoever. I mean, journalism wasn't even a thought. I mean, I thought that I would love to do that, but I wasn't really that great in school, so I didn't think I would be good enough to do it. And I'll never forget being at a dinner with my aunt and uncle, and them, giving you well, Larry, what do you want to do at college? Whatever, right, kind of thing. And so and I said, well, I'd really like to be a sports writer, but I got really bad scores in the SATs and verbal, whatever, and I wasn't very good in school. And my aunt, but I never forget, she said, you can go to college, you can do whatever you want to do, just go in. So I literally that moment, probably a week before I went to go to New Orleans, after that dinner, I said, all right, well, I'm going to go pursue journalism, and I did that down there. I took some journalism school classes. It was mostly common curriculum as a freshman, but that was my path starting there. And I eventually did transfer to Ithaca because I actually wanted to play intercollegiate sports, and they didn't have that in New Orleans. They just had intramural. So I went to Ithaca. It was D3. I knew I could get, because it was good enough to play D3 tennis
Yeah.
and get on and at least make a soccer team. And so I did that, and I pursued that at Ithaca, which, ironically enough, their communications program is heavy TV radio. I mean, there's a litany of very well-known TV radio people out there that came from Ithaca and Syracuse University, all up there with big-time TV radio programs. But that was not my pursuit, and we didn't really have a print journalism program there, if you will. So I just started getting internships at the local paper, the Ithaca Journal, which is a Gannett newspaper, and I'd work there, 3, 4 nights a week, taking scores over the phone while my buddies were out drinking. I was taking high school scores over the phone and writing up roundups because that was an afternoon paper back when there was such a thing. You and I are old enough to know
Right.
there was.
Well, I mean, I mean, right, Hartford, the Hartford Courant and Times. The Times was our afternoon paper. I
Yes,
remember. Yeah,
exactly.
I remember.
So,
Sure.
I was the guy. So none of the people at the paper worked at night. They came in the morning and put the paper out that was going to be published in the afternoon. So I was basically the flunky that would be taking the scores over the phone and writing all the roundups up, and I had all set and ready to go for them when they got there. And all the work was done for them. And they would throw me a bone on Friday nights every once in a while, and I'd go out and cover like a Dryden high school football game under the lights, or Horseheads, New York, or some of those small towns up around Ithaca.
Sure.
So that was kind of where I got my first hands-on stuff. And then when I graduated college, even a couple summers, I did some internships and just try to kept at it. I had a family friend from years and years ago when I was in college who basically said the absolute most important thing to do, and I kind of think that's true in any profession, but in journalism, you've got to get published. Even if it's I remember he said, even if it's church weekly or newsletter, or that free paper that they throw at the end of your parents' driveway or whatever. you just need to get published. So I started doing that. I started doing some free internships at some weekly papers up the line in Connecticut. You said you're from Hartford area? Is that where you're
Yeah,
from?
from West Hartford. Yeah.
So yeah, there was a whole chain of papers called the Shoreline Times all the way up the coast in Connecticut, like starting in New Haven. It was like Madison, Connecticut,
Yeah.
Sayreville,
Yeah.
some of those places. So I should say Old Saybrook. Anyway, places like
Yeah.
that. So I started doing that. I was writing features on fluff features on wind sailing, but that was I saw my byline, and that's a rush, when you
Right.
see.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so that was a really long answer to a short question, but that really that's kind of was the path for me. And there was a couple seminal moments like that, the conversation at dinner with my aunt and uncle out in the Hamptons as a kid and before I went to school, and just getting the internships, doing the publishing, work for the school newspaper. I have a funny, I'll shut up in a sec, but
No, no, this is great. Go ahead.
when I became a professional, and I was on the Jet beat for a long time. I do columns, so I still do a lot of Jets and Giants, very much like our mutual friend Sam
Yeah.
Farmer. I do a
Yeah.
lot of NFL columns and heavy Jets and Giants, but I was a Jet beat writer for 17 years. That's where I was hired to go to the Post in 1993 to be the Jet beat writer, and I eventually took over covering the golf immediately when I started doing that. But one of my colleagues, still a colleague, and he's still the Jet beat writer. Then he was at Newsday, and then he went to Daily News, and now he's at ESPN.com. Is Rich Cimini, and he's a Syracuse grad. And Rich and I are around the same age, and Rich actually brought in a copy, literally a hard copy of an article he wrote about a Syracuse Ithaca soccer match that I played in
Oh, wow.
because he was working for the Daily Orange, doing the same thing I was on a larger
Yeah.
base, a bigger school. And unfortunately, because I didn't play, maybe at all or if much, I was not in the article. But I was in that game that he covered. He covered, and he had the clip of it, like 30 years later, which was really kind of a cool thing.
That's very cool. So you're doing all this stuff, the different papers and stuff. How's the New York Post opportunity come about for you?
Well, I tell you what. Again, it's connections, it's timing, it's luck. I think in any profession, I worked my ass off. I mean, listen, since those days when my dad brought the Post home off the train, that was the only place I ever wanted to work was the New York Post.
Yeah.
It's before I even went to college. When I was just a high school knucklehead, poring over the stats, and so that was always my goal. But you know, you have to kind of pay your dues, work at smaller papers. Now it's a little bit different. You got kids that are going to bigger schools like, I mean, we have a lot of interns at the Post now that they're all from University of Wisconsin and Michigan and
Right,
Syracuse.
right, sure.
And, there's a lot of pathways now for these kids to get into these internships at big papers. And quite frankly, there's not many small papers left anymore to pay your
No,
dues.
that's true.
But so I was working, I was grinding. I worked at a couple papers in Connecticut. I was a weekly paper in Greenwich, Connecticut. Then I was a sports editor for Greenwich Time, which is the daily paper in town. And I always wanted to write, but I was trying to be as multi-dimensional as I could because I thought that was going to be the best way to get me, wherever I wanted to go to the larger papers. And I
Right.
happen to be a really, really good layout person, a good, page designer because I really like doing that. Not as much as writing, but when you're a sports editor of a small paper in a small town, you're doing everything.
Sure.
So I kind of sold my soul when I applied for a job for the New York Giants beat at a paper called the Morristown Daily Record in about 1985.
So that's New Jersey, Morristown, New Jersey, right?
Morristown, New Jersey,
Yeah.
85, 86, I want to say. And I was living an easy life in Greenwich, man. I mean, I lived across the parking lot from the paper. I was the sports editor. I could do whatever I wanted. I was playing tennis with the mayor of the town every Wednesday afternoon. But I was making freaking 21,000 bucks a year in the
Yeah.
most expensive, town, outside of around where you live right now,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, no, it is for sure.
And I think it was like second to Beverly Hills or something like that
Yeah,
back in the
yeah,
day. So I'm like, look, I can't keep her. I've got to advance. I got to do this. If I'm going to get to New York, I can't sit in Greenwich, at a
right.
15,000 circulation paper for my life. So, yeah, so I applied for this giant job in Morristown, and in doing that, I sent them like page designs that I did, all this stuff. Hey, look what else I can do, right? Well, unbeknownst to me, um, there were two openings. One was the giant beat, and another was for like the assistant sports editor to put the paper out at night. They gave the giant beat to somebody else, and they offered me the assistant job, which I took because I thought it was the right thing to do, and I guess it turned out to be the right thing to do. But I hated, I was working basically, Tuesday through Saturday from 5 to 1 in the morning, putting
Ugh,
paper out,
yeah,
not writing.
right.
And then I got it. So I got an opportunity after about a year of doing that in Bridgewater, New Jersey,
Hmm.
uh, to be an assistant sports editor. It was a Gannett paper. They were launching a Sunday paper, and they were bringing me in to kind of, bring, put together a big Sunday sports spread. And I said to them right up front in the interview, I said, listen, you got to give me 1 or 2 days a week to write. Let me go to Giants or Jets camp on the Wednesday and cover a game on Sunday, whichever team is home. And I said, I won't take the job. I was up front with them on that. And they said, good, done. So I did that. But I ended up there for like 7 years because that was during the, I don't know how much you follow newspapers, Larry, but remember when the National came out,
Oh,
you know,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff. They hired a bunch of great writers away, and then that lasted a year, and then all of these writers are out of work. It was a very difficult time to get
yeah, yeah.
to
I'm
advance
sure.
because you had you had big time big city sports writers are out of business. So I kind of got stuck in Bridgewater for about 7 years, but I was working my ass off on the Jet beat and the Giants beat, going out 1 day a week, but I was breaking stories, but there was no internet. So I would have a story on a Wednesday about something, and one of the New York papers would pick it up on Thursday and claim it as theirs because nobody was
Yeah,
reading my paper in
right,
central New
right,
Jersey.
right.
But one of my best buddies was a guy named John Giannone. He now works for MSG Network, doing the Rangers broadcasts. And John G he was the Giant beat writer at the time, and he kept going to the sports editor. Listen, this guy's breaking stories, and everybody else is stealing his stuff. You know, you need to hire him, and that really got me hired at the Post. When the Jet Beat opened up, they hired me as the
Interesting.
Jet Beat writer, and John
Yeah.
was it was all about John pushing me. And just to give you, again, I will shut up in a sec, which I
No,
haven't.
this is great. Go ahead.
But just to give you like, and we're of the same age,
Yeah,
the old school newspaper, the way it used to be, kind of thing, right? No
yeah.
internet, no
No, right,
Zoom, right?
right.
My interview at the Post was with the Post sports editor. I was still working nights, in the paper in New Jersey, and he said, "Meet me." He got meet me at Donahue's, which was a Irish pub on 42nd and 3rd in Manhattan. After you get off of work, and I said to the guy, his name is Bob Decker, who was the sports editor who hired me at the time. And I said, Bob, I'm not getting off till like midnight. And he goes, don't worry about it. Meet me there at 1 a.m. I literally, that was my interview was with Bob Decker at an old Irish pub that's no longer there on 42nd and 3rd. We probably pounded a 6 pack of Budweisers at the bar between the two of us. I mean, each. And that was my job interview. And he goes, I'm hiring you. You're in. So
That's
that is,
hilarious.
that's old school. I never went to an office and had to put a jacket and tie
I
on
love it.
and whatever, pretend I was responsible. I mean, we just sat there, had beers. He goes, "You're in." So that was my end of the Post, and I've been forever grateful to that. And it's funny, you have opportunities as you go. You're always looking for something more. I've always wanted to be a general columnist, at the Post. The traditional. Your Bill Plaschke. In
Yeah,
LA,
yeah. A good example
that's a
out
little
here.
bit of
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
I was so long as the Jet beat writer, 17 years, that you kind of get typecast a little bit. Oh, all that guy knows is football, that kind of
Right,
thing,
right,
or
right.
golf, as it turns out too. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and now the age of the general columnist is not really what it used to be anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Yeah.
much more specialized and stuff. So, but my point is, I had some opportunities to go other places, I had some offers, didn't take them, and thank God I didn't take them. You know what I mean? Because I'm
Yeah.
still at the place I've always wanted to be, and
It's great.
and quite frankly, knock on wood, I'm going to knock on my desk and my head here. The New York Post is we're one of the last standing newspapers
You
that actually
are.
that actually
Absolutely.
spends money to go out and cover events with
Yeah.
personnel rather than just aggregating like everybody else does or take wires it's remarkable. And as you know, I mean, who starts up a brand new newspaper in this industry? Well, we have the California Post now.
Right. We
It's
do.
right in our
Absolutely.
backyard.
Absolutely.
And, so just the fact that we are expanding in that way is pretty remarkable. So, listen, I finally got my dream. It just took a long time to get there. I mean, I graduated college in '83. and I got to the post in 93. So it was 10 years of grinding trying to get there, but I finally did get there, and now I've been there 33 years
which is
and really have
awesome.
never wanted to be anywhere else.
Which is awesome. Let me turn a little bit to the golf stuff because, as you mentioned, I mean, it was primarily the Jets beat writer, but also, you got into golf. I mean, what was that like for you? I mean, I'm assuming you hadn't covered a lot of golf in the 10 years that you were doing at different newspapers. And what was it like to cover golf as a journalist? I mean, had you played much? I mean, you probably hadn't written about it much. I mean, that was sort of
Yeah.
diving into a new area for you.
So I did cover some golf, Larry, because we had the old manufacturers Hanover Westchester Classic at Westchester Country Club
Yeah,
when I
yeah,
when I was still when I was working in Greenwich, and that was a big thing because that was a pro
yeah,
event.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I would do that. I would do little stuff around. I would cover, but the weird thing is, I didn't play golf as a kid. I never wasn't. I was a tennis player and basically every other neighborhood sport you could find, tackle football and buddy in people's yards and stuff like that. So I never really played golf at all, but I did, like I had a chance to cover some things like Westchester Classic and things like that. And then when I went to Bridgewater, we would have the occasional, U.S. Open at Baltusrol, for example,
Right,
which is
right,
in our
sure.
backyard. That kind of stuff I would do. So I knew enough about golf. But I never really played it. I played a little beer golf at Ithaca in college with some buddies. I don't think I ever had a scorecard in my hand. We had a lot of beers in the back, right? So when I got to the Post, oddly enough, one of the previous Jet beat writers and who also covered golf was a guy named Peter Finney, whose dad was a legendary sports columnist at New Orleans Times-Picayune, ironically, which I used to read when I was in college down there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Peter was named after his dad. He left the Post to go down to work at some Catholic newspapers down around in Louisiana, New Orleans. And I took over the golf beat because he was the last guy to cover golf. So they're like, okay, you're going to go do the Masters in 1994. I'm like, okay, let's go. And I got to tell you, this is the weirdest thing, and I might be wrong. I'm not sure, Larry, if I ever watched the Masters on television before I covered one. I
Wow.
I just because
Okay.
I wasn't really a huge golf junkie.
Yeah.
And the cool thing was, and it always remains now too, because I've been lucky enough to have editors that have been into golf. Some people, my colleagues work in newspapers, and their editors don't care. They don't value golf. They don't think it's that important, so they don't, cover it. Now, no, now almost nobody covers it in newspapers. But so I got the golf beat just kind of by proxy. I was the Jet beat writer, and the previous Jet beat writer also covered golf. So Cannizzaro, you do golf. So all of a sudden, I'm doing the U.S. Open every year. I'm doing the Masters every year. I'm doing all the majors. I didn't start doing the British until 97 because guess whose first major was in 97?
Right, Tiger,
Tiger
right.
Woods.
Yeah.
So I've done every single British since 97. So the other thing we did at the Post, which is cool, is my sports editor Greg Gallo, who was kind of a legend, and his dad was a legendary cartoonist at the Daily News, Bill Gallo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Greg had me do. I used to do a golf page in the Post. It was more local centric. It was, we got an advertiser, and literally I was doing like I was actually doing golf course reviews, like restaurant reviews initially.
Really?
Just, yeah, I mean, literally right down to who has the best hot dog at the turn, kind of thing, or, how good do they make a Bloody Mary at the halfway house kind of thing. So I was doing that, and I was also doing some instructional pieces as a supplement to that. So I would interview the pro wherever I was, and he would. And that all of a sudden, I got the bug doing that. I don't know what it was. To the point now where I can't get enough golf. I mean, I'll play. I mean, if I have 5 days free, I'll play 5 days. In the week. So I got the bug covering golf, not necessarily the pro game, but going and doing these golf page things, and then doing these instructional pieces with these area pros. And the golf page morphed into some fun, wacky stuff. Like I went and got hypnotized. I had the shanks at one point,
Oh
could
boy.
not get rid of the shanks, and
Oh boy.
I had an idea to go find. I went and found a hypnotist, and I and the guy actually by trade was a dentist. And I had a photographer come with me, and I just for like for fun, I took a pitching wedge with me, and I was in the dentist chair, clutching a pitching wedge with my eyes closed, and that was the picture for the story.
That's
And that was
hilarious.
and it actually, it was more of a mind relaxation exercise. I really don't think I was ever out hypnotized, but I did fun stuff like that got me involved into it and all that kind of stuff, and that made me want to try to get better and all that, and So that really is what got me into it. And, obviously I've been lucky enough now to cover like 120 something majors now since well, I've covered a few majors before I got to the post, but really the posts from 90, 93, 94 on, I've done every major championship, since then. So all
Yeah,
four.
I mean, so many. I mean, and we'll get into that. I mean, you mentioned Tiger. We'll get into him for a minute in a minute. 97 is you look at you've covered his whole career, covered all the Ryder Cups since 97. Lots happened on that. And of all these majors, I mean, that's a lot of majors. I mean, any one particular one stand out above the rest for you?
I would always say there's a handful of them. And the weird thing is, not that I'm actually a very positive person, but some of the ones that I remember the most are the tragic collapses. Like Norman in '96, at
Yeah.
Augusta,
Yeah.
and John Van de Velde in
Vandeveld, right?
'99.
Yeah, there's nothing
And
more tragic than that one. I
yeah, but
mean,
what stood out about those was not the failure of the players, but their reaction in the immediate aftermath, like the class with which each guy, like Van de Velde in '99, he was a very kind of a goofy, funny guy.
yeah,
He just kind of was like, the way he took it just wasn't, it made you feel a little bit better about what happened, even though you
right,
felt awful for him because he just, obviously that was his first incredible moment in that kind of a white hot spotlight and that kind of
right,
level.
right.
And Norman, same thing. I mean, now I hate to say it, but and I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but a lot of players, if that happens to them nowadays, they're marching right to their car and flipping the bird to the media. They're not gonna, hey, listen, there's a lot of accountable players out here, and I don't want to paint a brush, paint them everybody, but there's a lot of players that are not gonna, hold up their end of the bargain, so to speak, with the media.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I feel
for
like
sure.
those moments, like Norman after that was amazing. Mickelson after
Oh,
he
Wingfoot?
blew his
Yeah,
drive at wing foot
yeah,
into the tent. He's standing in front of us afterwards, saying literally his quote will be seared in my memory forever. He stood up in front of me, he goes, of all of us, and he said, "I am such an idiot."
yeah.
Like literally, I mean,
I remember that.
that's
Yeah,
such incredible, heartfelt, raw, uncensored, reaction, and that's what we all look for in our business, right?
sure, sure.
And there's so few of that now because everything's so homogenized, and like I'm coming off of Live Golf where I just was, covering the tournament
Right.
in New Jersey, and every interview conducted there is all homogenous. They've got them all in the interview room, and most of the media in there are live, bots, so to speak. They're just people that, are, they're almost, I don't know, they're probably paid by Live.
Yeah.
But so we don't have those two things, those couple three things. But Mickelson's win at the '04 Masters, which was
Yeah,
his
his
first
freeway broke
first
through.
major,
Right. Yeah.
and he was such a storyline for years as that he kind of almost unwittingly invented the best player never to win a major
Yes,
label, right?
agreed. Right.
And and it's weird. I almost don't hear of that label that much anymore. And there's a lot of players like that. I mean, Ricky
Yeah.
Fowler certainly had that for a long time, and
Yeah.
Phil, when that Sunday afternoon at Augusta. Have you been to Augusta before, Larry? No.
I have. I was actually there once, and
The Masters?
ironically, at the Masters. Yeah, I never played it, but I went to the Masters, oddly enough, in 2016, and I was there behind the 12th tee, watching Jordan make his seven and blow that, and so.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's an incredible experience.
Yeah.
I mean, you're there every year, but it's just an incredible place for
Well,
sure.
the reason I ask you is it's just a different feel there. You hear the
Yes,
roars.
you
You can
do.
hear a
Right.
roar. You know where the roar came from. If
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could be the other side of the golf course and somebody's eagled 13, or
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
Um, and so that duel, because it's funny, nobody ever remembers the guys that the winners dueled with, but Ernie Els had a
Ernie Els, right?
crazy
Which,
good.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, him and Phil were birdieing the bejesus out of the back
right.
nine on
That's
that
right.
Sunday, and Phil ends up coming out on top. I thought that was some of the greatest golf in the hottest cauldron of pressure that I'd ever seen, not just from Phil but from Ernie. So
Yeah,
that's one that really really stands out to me. Um, I mean, and obviously Tiger's first one in '97 almost didn't seem real. I mean, it was like he just showed up and then just completely smoked, the entire golf world. And if you remember, he shot 40 on his
40
front
went four, right,
on
right, 40.
on the Thursday.
Yeah.
And then of
40
course,
30, right? 40
yeah,
30.
yeah. And then of course, 2019. I mean, that was extraordinary. I mean,
Magical, right?
nobody ever
That
thought
he
he was going to do that again. And that was, and I'm very, very tight with his caddy, Joe LaCava, who was on his bag in 19 at
yeah,
that
yeah.
time. And I don't know. You have certain memories of stuff. My memories aren't necessarily. My memories are of that where everything that went down at 12 at Amen Corner, if you remember, because
The,
everybody
the,
around
the four
Tiger
different people
melted.
washed their balls. I mean, it
Yeah,
was like
it
the
was
Red Sea opened and parted for
exactly. It was almost like the old days when guys would look at the leaderboard and see Tiger and go, "Oh shit, I got to get out of here."
him.
And it
Right,
was literally,
exactly.
Brooks Koepka, Finau, Molinari, I want to say maybe even Poulter. I can't. There was like at least four or five guys
Yeah.
that literally just melted down and rinsed balls on 12, and Tiger went right through the door and boom, he wins the thing. But I remember hanging out at the courtesy car in the parking lot behind the actually in front of the clubhouse on the other side of the course with Joe. He still had the flag
The
from 18.
flag, sure.
He was
Yeah.
waiting for Tiger to come out. It was myself and maybe two other reporters who know Joe, and just chit-chatting about how crazy it was, and so that was that. I mean, those two were, Tiger wins. I've seen all of them, all the majors. Those are the ones that really stand out to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see the 7 Days in Augusta in the background there. I know you wrote the book. I mean, and I do want to ask you about that. I mean, you've been to all these masters, wrote the book. I mean, what parts of the culture of Augusta do you think the average fan doesn't really know about or appreciate, and what makes the Masters so special, do you think?
Well, I think what people don't realize unless you go there, and you were there and you saw it.
Yeah.
I mean, Augusta National is the driveway to Augusta National, which, as we know, is Magnolia Lane. Uh, it's literally like it's on a road called Washington Road, which is a honky tonk.
Yeah,
There's
right.
strip joints, there's
Right.
Hooters, there's
Right.
it's like this is the most elegant golf club on the planet. You're a most exclusive,
Yeah.
and it's literally you're taking a right hand turn across the street from like a dive bar, and all these ministries and all these stuff they have in these strip malls and stuff. So I think with so that is, and then then you're in the gates, and like it literally is like somebody has airlifted you and just put you someplace fake because there's not a weed out of place. I mean, it's just first, there's no weeds. I mean, there's not a blade of grass out of place. Everything looks almost too perfect. It's like somebody dropped you into a natural Disney World, kind of thing, right? And so that's the experience inside the gates. But what people don't realize is how much the Masters drives the town. I mean, and they pretty much control the town too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were there in 16, so that's 10 years ago. I don't remember I think by then they had all of those parking lots all along, like basically
Yeah.
just a bunch of
Yeah.
empty lots and fields.
Yeah.
Those used to be thousands of homes before you got there. I don't know if you know that or not. Did
Yeah.
you know that?
I knew they bought up a ton of homes around it. Yeah.
Those were neighborhoods, plural of homes. They moved streets. Like there's a road called Berkman's Lane, Berkman's Road that used to
Where
go
they
right
have the nice
along,
thing. Right. Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
used to go right along, the back side of or the side of the Gulf Stream.
A five. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, but now that's where it is now. But it's
Oh, but they
been
moved
moved
it.
to
Yeah.
five. It used to
Yeah.
be, if you know where that water tower is, which is near where
Yeah.
now the media center is,
Yeah.
that used to be that whole area where the practice range used to be. Well, I'd say range is probably too. I'll probably get fined for saying that, but whatever the practice grounds, if you will, where that whole area is, and I'm sure you saw that when you were there. It's the
Yeah.
most amazing practice
Yeah.
facility you've
Oh, it
seen.
is. Yeah.
When I first started covering the Masters, Larry, that was a gravel parking lot. That was where we parked to go into the place, right? And that's where Berkman's Road was.
I
Berkman's Road
see.
now, it's like a half a mile down the
Yeah.
road.
Way all the other side. Right. Yeah.
But it's hard to describe to people and the thing is, like I'm there when there's a tournament there. If you're driving down Washington Road now, like if you and I were just driving down the road right now to go, get a breakfast pancake or something at a pancake house, uh, you know, you would look and you'd be like, what is all that what the empty space for? It's for one freaking week a year for people to park for free. They don't even charge.
Right. Right. right.
I mean, it's just the whole culture there. It's amazing. Um, Listen, people give Augusta a lot of flack because it's so exclusive and all that kind of stuff, but the stuff that they do for the towns, for the city there, and obviously, I mean, obviously charities and things like that. And I'm not trying to bring a violin out kind of thing, but it really is, the book that I wrote really is what goes on Masters Week, and it just transforms that town for that week every year. Our media center is literally like it's like the most first class golf
Yeah, I was
clubhouse.
going to say they built a new one within the last 10 years, right? Or when
Yes,
did it
it is.
open?
It is
Yeah.
literally. I mean, I'm almost embarrassed walking into. I almost feel like I'm not worthy when I walk into the place. Because I mean, we have our own restaurant in there. Like we go in there, media. We're treated like scum everywhere else, basically, right? And I mean, the press boxes are moving closer and closer to heaven, in football stadiums. And I mean, listen, we're being phased out. At Augusta, it's the opposite. They build this freaking Taj Mahal for us with this incredible amphitheater. I mean, I have my own space that's mine. I only go there once a year, but it's mine. It's got my nameplate on it. I've got TV monitors. I could, the technology. I have a TV monitor where I can click and see what's going on in every hole. I don't have to go out on the golf course, which is a funny thing about that media center, is that one of the large reasons they built that center that way because it's on the back side of the practice facility, so it's a
Right,
little bit of
right.
a hike to
Yeah.
get to the clubhouse. But they do a good job of whisking people back and forth in golf carts. But they don't want us on the golf course. There's already enough fans or patrons, excuse me,
Patrons can't use
on the golf
fans.
course, right?
Right. Yeah.
So the powers that be, they've made that place like it's like the what do they call it, like the Velvet Hammer or something like that. I don't know
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
like we're firing you, but not not so hard, whatever. I mean, they don't want us on the golf course. They want us sitting in our spaces, watching it on television, and reporting from there. And they'll bring the players into the interview rooms, when you're, the leaders and stuff. So yeah. I mean, I've seen an unbelievable transformation there on the golf course. All the stuff that the merchandise facility, which is now engulfs where our old media center used to be, which is right near the first hole.
Right.
Um, it's like a Walmart. I mean,
Yeah.
and not only that. Picture going to a Walmart on a Saturday and having to wait in a 45-minute line just to get in there and spend your money. Like
Yeah.
there is literally a line snaking the property
Yeah. Yeah.
to get into that place to spend. And which is cool. That's the other thing cool about Augusta is they don't gouge on the prices. They're relatively fair prices, for a big event selling merch. And as I said, they don't charge for parking. If they charged $50 a car to park, they would make it for everyone. Every one of those lots would still be filled.
Yeah.
They don't
Oh,
charge
sure.
annual parking. So
Yeah.
it's a weird dynamic there, the whole thing, because obviously there was a rich culture that there's the rich white man culture, if you will. Let's be
Right.
honest.
Right.
Not that it's a white only anymore or men only anymore, but yet they do a lot of good things. They do, they keep the city afloat really to a large degree because of the economy.
It's really an interesting thing. I mean, yeah, and of course the prices that are more than reasonable, or the concession prices are ridiculous. It's like you're in
Yeah.
the 1950s when you look at the
Well,
prices of sandwiches.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Larry, but
Yeah.
if you're able to buy a ticket, which which you can't, of course, but
Right.
the tickets to the tournament, now you probably went on a connection or you invited them
Right.
because
I
that's
got
how most
invited by
people get
someone.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how most people can get in because the tickets are, it's like an exclusive season ticket holder. They're not going to give them up.
Right. Right. Right.
Uh, but we in the media have an opportunity to get into a lottery to buy tickets for somebody. I did that for a couple I met a few years ago when I was at the British Open. I'm actually a stage 4 melanoma survivor, and I just
Oh, wow.
was paired or just hooked up with a couple, and in when the Open was a Troon a few years ago, and the gentleman he had stage 4 melanoma. He was in great shape. He was a great golfer, and I asked his wife. I said, if I could get tickets for you guys, would you guys come to America and go? They said absolutely. So I put in for them. I was lucky enough to get them. My point is, I bought them. I think it's $750 for the entire week
Which
badge.
is crazy.
I
Yeah.
mean,
I know.
and they're going for 7,000 for one
Right.
day sometimes,
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
Right.
on the market. So they don't gouge you with the tickets, even though you can't get them. But as you said, they don't gouge you for the food, the beverage, the merch, all that kind of stuff. They don't charge for parking. I mean, listen, they don't, let's be honest, they don't need to, Larry. They make so much money.
Oh, this TV
It's just,
rights alone, I mean, it's
oh,
just, yeah.
and now all the corporate stuff, they've got the Berkman's Place, which
Yes,
you
yeah,
referred
yeah,
to, which is this,
yeah.
it's probably the most exclusive and expensive corporate sporting experience there is out there. They literally have three replica greens in there. I've never even seen it. They won't allow the media in there. I can't even just go look at it.
Yeah, and
That's how
I've
exclusive.
only heard about it from people I know who've been there. I have not
Yes,
set
yeah.
foot there, but I've heard about it.
They have their own merchandise logos in there for
Right,
Masters
right.
stuff. You know, it's like a
I've heard
very
that. Right. Very
uber exclusive
exclusive.
program. You know,
Yeah.
Condoleezza Rice is basically greeting you at the door there. That's what she does.
Exactly. Augusta National member Condoleezza Rice. Right.
Exactly. So,
Exactly.
but I know I ramble a little bit. You know, the
No,
book that
no, no. This is good
it's
description of it.
this what do they call this product placement? Is that what this
There
is?
it is. I got Jets on one side. I love the Ithaca helmet we got there, and we got
Even though I didn't
Augusta on
play
the
soccer, I played football. I played soccer, not football. But the book really is, and I'm not trying to sell it. You know, of course I am. I'm going to sell it, but
other.
it's the cool thing is I wrote it. It actually came out COVID year. It came out in March of 2019 is when it dropped, and then there was no 2018 April Masters because of COVID.
Right. That was the Fall
So
Masters with
yeah,
Dustin.
so we ended
Right.
up in November, which was weird, and I don't know what it did for book sales or whatever. But the book is kind of light reading. It's all about the stuff that goes on the week that I'm there. I get there Sunday, the week before Sunday, and it's there's certain things that happen on certain nights. You know, I mean, you know, they've got the obviously the par three tournament is on the Wednesday. You know, they have the champions dinner on the Tuesday. So I did chapter on the champions dinner, talked to a lot of past champions about what goes on in that exclusive night, and just also just some wacky different stuff. I did a chapter on this fan, this guy that I know who lives in New York City, who's one of the most eclectic, bizarre guys. But he literally he has this thing. He goes down there every year. He leaves on Saturday. He literally buys 150 pimento cheese sandwiches,
Oh boy.
and he has a cooler with him in his car, and he times it so he has like a refrigerator in his car, so he keeps them good, and he has them in perfectly in bags so they don't get mashed. And he drives halfway up on Saturday night to Richmond, Virginia, stays at the same Omni Hotel, and gets up on Sunday morning, drives back to Manhattan. He lives on Madison Avenue in Manhattan here, and he has a master's party at his house. And they all have pimento cheese sandwiches and egg
Well,
salad
I was
sandwiches.
just say these days you could make it a lot easier because the last few
You could,
years they've started doing these,
yes,
buy it and we'll ship you this
yes.
thing for your master's party with all the
This was
pimento cheese stuff and
this was
everything like that.
pre shipping. But
Pre-shipping,
anyway,
right?
but I did a story. The chapter I think is just called "The Fan," you know, and it's just
Yeah.
this guy. He's just this kooky guy, you know. And a lot of stuff, you know, as you know, you got the big tree, the big oak tree that's
The
right
big
next to
oak
the
tree in the
entrance.
back of the clubhouse, yeah.
And you know, the movers and shakers and the things that take place under that tree are is remarkable during the course of the week. And I did a chapter on the tree. You know, I literally talked to some players. You know, I mean, you know, players, agents, you know, coaches, family, you know, media, everybody, celebrities. Roger Goodell is a member there. Roger Goodell's hanging out under that tree during
Yeah,
Masters Week. You
right,
know,
right.
and you know, so it's I did a chapter. So those are it wasn't really it's not a golf book. It's just the crazy, bizarre week that it is. Those 7 days in Augusta. I have to give my wife credit because I said I don't know what I'm going to name it. She goes, "Well, call it 7 days in Augusta. You're there for 7 days." I said, okay, so there it is. So there's my product
That's
placement.
great. It's a unique sporting event to be sure. Let me we touched a little bit on Tiger and Phil. I just want to spend a little time on that briefly because you covered them all. I mean, Phil,
Yeah,
his career started a little bit before you got into the golf coverage, but Tiger, you're perfect timing. I mean, you're there. Joined the post in 93. Tiger's, turning pro late 96, 97. We talked about the Masters win and all the way through, the last, presumably his last major, the 2019 Masters. So
hmm
you've had a front row seat for him for really his whole career.
yeah,
And, obviously incredible, brilliant talent, brilliant career. I still think maybe the most amazing thing was the six straight USGA, championships in match play. I mean, the vagaries of match play and winning the
yeah,
three juniors in a row and then the three, U.S. amateurs, the comeback, up in Portland when he came for the win the third one
Mhm.
against Steve Scott. I mean, but the whole career unbelievable. But I think when we were all going through peak, I'll call it peak Tiger, right?
Mhm.
Where particularly the 2000 U.S. Open at Pebble, where it was just crazy, wins by what, 15 shots or some
Yeah,
crazy
oh, that was
number.
unbelievable.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, he's just like, and he went through that stretch. I think it was from when he kind of tweaked his swing a little bit. You would think you win the 97 Masters with the tournament record, you're in good shape, but he tweaks
yeah,
it with Butch a little bit, and
yeah,
then, he kind of gets back on track with the beating Sergio Medina in 99. And that stretch from, I think, the 99 PGA back when PGA was the last major of the year as opposed to
yeah,
being in May, through Beth Page in 2002, the US Open, those 11 majors, he wins 7 of the 11. Crazy clip he's
yeah.
winning at. And so everyone's thinking he's just going to fly by Jack's, 18. And of course, that didn't happen. You look back on it, I mean, what stands out to you most about him? I mean, obviously the brilliance, he's certainly, people talk about the Mount Rushmore of golf, he's certainly on that with probably Nicholas Hogan and Jones and incredible drive and competitiveness, but the self-destructiveness too. I mean, I'm thinking of, I think it was Armin Katayan's book on him talking about, the running with the lead boots down with the
Yeah.
Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
That's not going to do your back any good. So I mean, I'm
No.
just kind of when you look back on it, because you had a front row seat for the whole thing. Kind of what's your thinking of him in retrospect?
Well, it's funny. I'm going to start with the Jack thing because I remember Jack telling us more than one occasion at Masters when he was holding court, with a pre-tournament interview and whatnot. Because, if you remember, I think Arnie and Jack, I think it was, I would say Arnie said he's going to win more green jackets than Jack and I combined or something like that.
Or either he or Jack said that, right? More than the two of them
Yeah,
combined, right?
but as Tiger was starting to pile them up, and Jack is funny because Jack's still got an ego at 80, age 80, whatever he is. He doesn't like Jack. He's going to be gracious if one of his records is broken, but he doesn't want them to be broken, Larry,
Sure.
right?
And he'll say that. I've heard him say that. He'll
Yeah.
say
So,
that,
and Jack would say this not in a mean way, but it was a very prescient thing that he would say, and I know he said it on more than one occasion. He said, listen, you know what? He doesn't have a wife yet, a family. Now Jack was the one that literally managed that probably better than any athlete,
Yeah,
not just golfer
incredible,
of all
right?
time.
Incredible.
He was a great dad. Not to say
Yeah.
Tiger's not a good dad, but he was at his kids. He literally because he was wealthy enough in those days to be able to fly private.
Fly,
Before
right,
it
right.
became, everybody flies private now, but
Yeah.
except me, unfortunately. Um, so uh, you know. Jack was able to do those things, and in when Tiger was really was mowing those all those records down and winning those on that run, if you will, certainly long before he became self-destructive. He wasn't married with kids for a lot of that time, and Jack said, listen, life happens kind of thing, and you got to just see how it plays out, essentially, is what he said. And we did see how it played out for Tiger, in living color, in public, very public
Yeah,
living color.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and, you know, obviously the addiction situation is the worst of all of it.
yeah, for
And
sure.
and it's seemingly that began, when that was taking place, you would have to think, at that time when he was married to Elin and the whole supposed 6 iron through the window of the SUV and
Right,
all that
right,
kind of
right,
stuff,
right.
with the fire hydrant thing. But so that was really kind of the first window to that the public had, if you will, right? So, um, you know, I it's funny. I've had an adversarial relationship with Tiger
Mm,
only because I feel like I was one of the very few people that would kind of take him to task for stuff. And I'm not talking about addiction or cheating on his wife or any of that stuff because that's not my purview as a sports writer. I mean, I'm not going to judge somebody that way. But I've written some stuff about Tiger that he didn't like, and he let me know about it. Um, but I've also, the massive majority of what I've written, obviously, is incredibly positive because why wouldn't you, if you're covering golf, write positive things about Tiger? And I think he's come around now where we're at now. But you know, I've respected Tiger for so many things. One of the things I respect him for, and I go back to, because I am in the media. Um, and I see so many guys skipping out and blowing off the media, big names, who just don't really feel like it's a responsibility. Tiger, I always respected, there wasn't, I mean, I can count on one hand and all the times I covered Tiger that he didn't show up and speak to the media after a round, even if it was the worst round he played in 6 months. Um, and listen, Tiger also was a guy that never really said much. He
I was
was,
going to say he was always there, but
you
it's
could
like he
be, yeah,
did. As
he
someone
could
as
do
smart as he is, but he knew how to sort of talk without saying anything.
He could do a 25-minute interview, Larry, and you'd walk out of there and you'd transcribe it and try to write something. Like, what the hell did he just say? It was like a big nothing burger. But the bottom line was he would come out and he
Yeah,
was there. And there's a lot of guys that don't do that now.
yeah,
It's unfortunate. He goes, obviously I'm biased because I'm part of the media, but we are the conduit to a large degree, and still are, even with social media, to the reader and the general public who want to know, what's going on. So. I've always respected him for that. I respect the fact that he can't go out to 7-Eleven and get himself a big gulp without
yeah,
being,
yeah. Uh,
besieged.
sure.
I mean, that's got to be a really weird, life to live, and even our biggest stars now don't have that really. Scotty Scheffler, Rory, I think people, leave those guys alone compared to Tiger. I mean, listen, I'm sure they have to deal with it. Of course they do, but listen, I'm not judging Tiger by the addiction or whatever, the cheating, all that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, I think we had the most consecutive New York Post front pages were during the Tiger cheating scandal.
Yeah,
I think it
some
was literally, it was like
memorable
20 or
headlines. Yeah,
21 straight.
yeah, yeah,
I was actually, I remembered, I've got a very good relationship with Phil over the years, and he's been very good to me, especially when I was sick. He was reaching out to me, and
Oh, that's a,
so I've played a bit of golf with Phil, and I remember playing golf with Phil and Butch Harmon when Butch was working with Phil. And Butch asked me about all the New York Post because he's a big newspaper guy. He's an old school guy, and he goes, Is there any way you can send me like all 21 of those?" Just for nostalgic purposes, not to be mean to Tiger or anything like that. But yeah, listen, we've seen, Tiger more than any athlete in certainly my generation, which would be your generation, there's never been an athlete more scrutinized and with
yeah,
less privacy.
yeah.
And you know, you gotta, I mean, you gotta feel for him in that way. I mean, has he done some dumb things? Sure, we all have. But when you and I do dumb things, it's not
No one knows about it.
page of
Right,
the New York Post,
right.
and so yeah, we're in a weird period right now because we don't have Tiger and Phil out there, and this was the first year that we didn't have Tiger
I
or
was going to
Phil
say they
playing in
didn't play in
majors.
any majors. Right.
And we're talking, 30, well, whatever it is, 30 plus years
Long
now.
time.
That
Right.
is, and listen, neither of those guys was competing in their latter parts of their, years on the PGA Tour anyway, just in terms of they weren't going to win again. I mean, obviously Phil won in 21, which was one of the most, that was a pretty remarkable week,
That
but,
was
he
unbelievable.
was.
Right.
But so we've gotten used to seeing them not in contention, but we haven't really gotten used to not seeing them at tournaments at all.
Right.
And that's what was the reality of this year, which was kind of weird.
It was. And you mentioned Phil. I mean, and yeah, that 21 PGA win was unbelievable. And I know, and we'll in a sec talk about Live, but I mean, obviously, since then, I mean, we're talking a little more than 5 years when he was at that just incredible height that he won the PGA at that age. Between the live stuff and then some of the more recent stuff that's broken this year. I mean, he's just he's really I don't know how to say this. He's kind of lit himself on fire a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you always thought he was just his personality. You could see him going into the booth easily. You kind of envisioned him being one of the honorary starters, in the future at the Masters, and maybe some of those things will still happen. But I
Ryder
just
Cup captain.
Ryder Cup for sure. Thank
Been
you.
the
That
Ryder
was the
Cup captain this
abs
past year.
the abs 100%. And
Yeah.
I mean, he was so, I always sort of thought, not a perfect analogy, but the Nicholas Palmer with Woods and, and Phil. I mean, Phil was sort of the man of the people and, was so popular and, had all those unbelievable heartbreaks at the US Open.
Yeah.
I mean, Arnie obviously won at Cherry Hills, but then he had the three loss, the runner-ups, and of course the Casper thing at Olympic, and just
Hmm.
incredible things. So I always thought there was a little bit of a parallel there, but I mean, I don't know where Phil stands now. I mean, it's between Live and the more recent stuff, he's not where I thought he would be.
Yeah. Well, Phil learned a lot from observing Arnie, and I've spoken to him about it a bit. He always referred to a U.S. Open in Oakmont. Might have been Arnie's
Oh, it
last.
was his last one in '94, I think, when
Yeah, I
when
think,
when
and I
Ernie
think
won.
Phil was a young guy, and I never
Yeah.
forget Phil saying he was coming down like the 17th hole or something like that, and there was a big tent, like off to the side, and there was all this commotion and ruckus over there, and he looked over there, and it was Arnie just hanging with the people, and and that was seared into his mind, Arnie doing that, and so Phil always modeled himself that way about the way to treat people and golf fans and stuff like that, and that as much as people like to hate on Phil, with the autograph thing, thinking it's fake, you know, you can't stand out there and sign the amount of autographs he does just for show. There's a lot of guys that do that. Tiger would go out there and sign about eight while the cameras were rolling. You know, and there's a lot of guys that do that, and they're throwing the hats back. A kid. I mean, you're not looking the kid. Phil looks people in the eye.
Yeah, yeah,
And certain guys have taken to that. I think Bryson too it does a great job with that
yeah.
now,
I agree
and
with
I
that.
think
Yeah.
he's learned a lot. And Ricky really was a guy that Phil took under his wing, and Ricky's been that way, and no accident. He's one of the most popular players out there. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's really, it's just, it's sad to see where we are right now. I think I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole here, but where this began, in my opinion, was when Phil was having a conversation with Alan Shipnuck, who was writing a book on him.
Right.
But Phil was not cooperating with the book because it was like it wasn't authorized. He wasn't going to tell Alan not to write the book. And Phil was also a guy, both Phil and Amy, who I know for fact had given Alan incredible access over the years because Alan's a California guy,
Yeah, he is. I've had him on the podcast. He's
yeah,
up in Monterey. I know him a little bit.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he's Alan's an amazing writer.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, what occurred with that conversation that he had with Phil, where the scary
The
MFers,
skip. Right, 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 right.
that in my opinion that changed everything for in terms of Phil's
Hmm.
just the way people viewed him. And I think that, because obviously that was a very, the whole Saudi involvement was a very polarizing thing. And now the people
Right.
are so anti-Saudi are going, oh, well, this guy's saying they're scary MFers, but he's taking their money. And you know what I mean? It
Right.
was just,
Right. Right.
and, as a journalist, you know, Alan can argue as much as he wants that that was on the record conversation, but it was a conversation, and I know that for fact. It was not a conversation for interview purposes. It was like you and I talking, like we're doing right now,
Right.
and me saying something like, hey Larry, let me tell you something. So and so has been stealing money from your club. What I don't know, something damning, and it's damning, and you're the reporter, and there's a credo as a reporter. If you say something damning to me, for example, that's better. I would say, Larry, that's interesting stuff, and that's pretty damning stuff. Are you okay if I use that? Like that's the way you do it with somebody who you've gained a trust with, who's been good to you. You know, Now, by the letter of the law, Phil did not say before they spoke, this is off the record.
Right.
So
Right.
if you're going by the letter of the law, then Allen didn't break a law, so to speak, a journalistic law. But in my opinion, he broke one of the, most sacred credos that we have in sports journalism, where you give your subject. I'll say, Larry, are you sure you want that out there? Because that's going to make a freaking good story for me, you know? And you might think about it for a minute and say, yeah, you know what? Go ahead and put my name on it. Or you might say, listen, you could use it, but don't quote me, just source it. Or you could say, listen, that is way off the record. Don't use that at all because people know where it came from or whatever. That's the way I learn journalism,
Interesting.
and
Yeah.
deal with subjects, whom I interview. And Allen did not afford Phil that courtesy. Okay. and he used it. And the way and if Alan was sitting right here next to me right now, I would say it to him, and he used that stuff. He sold his soul to sell some books, is what he did, and that became such a polarizing. Um, that was the beginning, right, if
Right,
you will, in
right,
terms of
right.
Phil's, in terms of the breaking down of Phil's um,
Image and stuff like that.
image,
Yeah.
And listen, Phil has done enough on his own to screw that up himself, and to be the
Right,
first to say
right,
that,
right, right.
he's made his mistakes, and again, like Tiger, he lives in a little bit of a public eye, and I have no idea what happened with that golf course with the cart girl or whatever. But
Yeah,
obviously, there's smoke, there's fire, something went down, whatever. I get it. I'm not certainly you're not condoning that in any way. Um, but I really feel like before all of this stuff happened, um, with the sexual, all the stuff that's come out, um, I really feel like that scary MFers quote was the beginning. That was a huge hit to Phil's image. Um, and what it really kind of bums me about of all the live stuff with Phil is everything Phil, and I would say this, and I'm not trying to blow sunshine up my butt, but Phil and I had conversations as live was before there was such a thing as live. I broke a story uh, long before anybody even knew there was a live was taking place. Phil had confided in me that he had gone to Monahan, to Jay Monahan, at that time the PGA Tour commissioner, with an investor and a plan with players and investors to buy five or six of the PGA Tour events that nobody watches, right? Name your event, the Valspar, no offense to anybody, but the lesser events that, this past week, Wyndham, who was watching that, other than golf junkies like us, but they were going to purchase those, the players along with the investor, and take those six events and turn them into team events where there was a guarantee that all the top players are going to play in those events. And that literally would have essentially cut the Saudis off at the knees because their whole premise was the team element.
right, right.
And Phil told me I was on vacation in Costa Rica, hanging out, sitting poolside with my wife, drinking rum smoothies, and he called me up. And because I'm a reporter and because I like a good story, I immediately went and got my laptop and we started talking. And he told me that he had other players that were involved with him at that time, who I won't name, but they were prominent players, and some of them are on live still now. That were involved in that and on board with that, I should say. So, and Monahan brought it to Ed Hurley, who at the time, or it was
Walktel partner Ed Hurley. I know
you
Ed,
know well, right?
yeah,
And he's
yeah.
very, very powerful man.
Very powerful. He and
And
Jimmy Dunn, we always say violate the 14 club rule, right? I mean, in terms of all
yes,
the clubs they belong
yes. So,
to.
and I've never met Ed before, but I do know that Ed saw the investor that Phil had on board and told the guy anything that is not PGA Tour owned or operated and controlled is considered hostile. Now, if you're a golf guy like I am. The PGA Tour is a 501c3 operation. It has been, right, up until Rolapp, came in. I mean, that doesn't sound like a charitable, conversation. Well, and I also think that I do believe, in my opinion, Larry, I think that quote really set Phil off. Also, I think it set him to say some things like he said to Alan, because that his quote to Alan came after our conversation about that all because obviously Liv was something then. I really think that really that because Phil has always had an issue with the PGA Tour and the way it's operated, and he's been the only guy that's been vocal about it. He's spoken words that a lot of other players would want to speak, but they never did. And Phil
Right.
felt the power and the platform to
Or
do
the
it.
media rights and all the different things under,
Exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
where's all this money going? You're a
Right,
501c3, you're a charitable operation. Now, yes, they've given away millions upon millions in charity, but where's the rest going?
right.
And so what really bums me out to a large degree here is that people don't look. Phil was very prescient with all this stuff. All the stuff that he told me back in the day. Going to Monahan. Monahan screwed that thing up so badly. I can't
He
believe he
did.
was
Yeah,
fired the next morning.
I mean, we've had, I mean, yeah, and I know, I'm sure you know the no laying up guys and the
Yeah,
different pieces. I mean, for years, it's like everyone's wondered, like, how does he still have a job? I can't
Yeah.
believe that Jay lasted as long as he did. I
He's a
agree with that
nice man.
assessment. Yeah, it
Nice
was a
man.
totally nice man, but in terms of
Just,
the
yeah.
performance here was,
Yeah,
not
he
good.
was out he was out over his skis. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
he was literally on the back foot from the moment Liv came, and that's
Yeah,
why that's why we got Brian Rolapp now trying to clean up the mess essentially,
yeah, yeah.
because he tried to compete with the unrealistic Saudi money, and he's screwed all the middle of the road tour grinders who quite frankly make up some of the best stories in the game in my opinion. And anyway, we could do 10 podcasts on that, but I think because Phil opened his mouth and was so brutally honest where he took this, he had a large part in lining all these freaking guys' pockets with money. All the
Yeah,
guys on the PGA Tour that were criticizing Phil when he went to live, he bought new houses because of what Phil did,
100%.
and
Yeah,
new
I agree.
boats and new
Yeah.
whatever, and there's a very, very small population there, in my opinion, that admits to that or would admit to that publicly. And I mean, and listen, Phil just happens to be the face of what took place at Live. He's not the only guy, but he certainly was the face of it and the most vocal, and was a big part of bringing a lot of those big names over to Live. And let's be honest, man, he made everybody rich. I mean, he did. He made everybody rich. Not him, but he was a part of that. And uh, you know, I don't like the fact that he's looked at the way he was, because he's looked at this, like, certainly beyond all the other, off the course stuff. He's looked at as this pariah, this freaking bad guy, wearing, cloak and dagger black. And, I mean, they all took, at the end of the day, Larry, they all took the freaking money,
Yeah, they
right?
did.
And I mean, to me, if you're going to ask me who the most egregious jumper was to live, it's John Rahm by 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
John Rahm sat in front of us with his
Fealty,
doe
pledge,
eyes.
pledge fealty. Wasn't that the term he said?
Absolutely. He's literally, and listen, I love John Rahm, and I have as much respect for him as a golfer and where he's come from, and where he's taken this from a guy who didn't even speak English when he came to Arizona to go to school and all that. Coached by Phil's brother, by the way.
Right, right.
Um,
Absolutely. Right.
but John sat there with those kind of like, innocent eyes that he has, and very earnest look.
Ernest,
And
yeah.
I don't need anything more than I have now. If I had an extra dollar in my bank account, I would not need it. My wife and I have all week, and like 3 months later, he's running. I'm coming. Oh, wait for me. Let's go.
Right,
Wait for
right.
500 million. But I'm not damning him for that. But I mean, if anything, he should be damned more than Phil for jumping, because Phil made it, Phil was pretty transparent in why he was jumping, And listen, for guys like Phil, 50 plus, Lee Westwood,
Yeah, Poulter, the rest of
Easy,
them. Yeah,
Poulter,
yeah, yeah.
all those guys, Keimer, those guys are never going to win again on
No,
the
no,
DP World
that's right.
Tour, or
I mean,
why
Stenson, there's
not
a whole
take
bunch of them. Yeah, that's
why
right.
not take the money? It was
Yeah,
perfect for them. It was a great move for Phil, because it was a great way to make $100 million, whatever the number was at the end of the day. And he's not gonna make that again, and not that Phil's not making a lot of money in his career, but so I don't know. I just, if you're really gonna look at guys who went to live and criticize them, I don't think anybody should deserve more criticism than John Rahm for the way he waxed poetic about the
well, yeah,
PGA
and
Tour.
I don't disagree. And I also think just from his own personal career standpoint, it was not the best move, but that's a whole
No.
different story. I mean,
Well,
I just
he's too stubborn too now, Larry,
he
because
totally because he had the path. They did the Brooks Koepka
yeah,
pathway back.
they moved the
How does
goalposts.
John not take that?
Well, because he's too stubborn. He
Right,
doesn't want to admit he was wrong.
right.
And, at some point he's gonna have to come crawling back, and you know, I mean, I thought it was a very deft move on the PJ Tour and Brian's part to just make up this rule along
Oh, it
the
was
way.
very narrowly
It's
crafted
Tuesday,
for
I think we'll make
yeah.
up this rule.
Well,
And it was like,
it was like crafting a tunnel that there were only three cars that could fit through it, right?
exactly, that's a great analogy. Like not even poor Patrick Reed could get through that tunnel. He's had to grind it out on the Asian tour, right? And all respect to Pat, what a great job he's done. He's like, you know what? This isn't right for me. I got to make a move. I'm going to just take my medicine, right? And Brooks has done a great job with that too. I thought Brooks has done an amazing job. He hasn't played well. I mean, his putting has been awful, obviously, and I mean,
Yeah,
just he
yeah,
just kind of flamed out at Wyndham. Um, he's been. The thing I love about Brooks is he's so transparent. Like, he just
yeah.
comes out and said, "Listen, I gotta make some changes here." But I think guys like Brooks and Rahm, those are the two guys in my opinion, that Live hurt most in terms of their games. And I think also, I just think that those two guys missed the juice more than anybody, in
Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
being at the big events with Rory and all the other guys, Scotty, all that. And, Brooks took the opportunity when the PGA Tour presented it. And, I mean, what is Cam Smith? Cam Smith was number two in the world. He just won a British Open. And he goes over there and he's like in witness protection now. I mean, I don't he can't make a cut. He can't make a cut at a member guest right now. Your member guest. You know. So it's just listen. There's no way any of those players can tell you that going to Live helped his game. It's just you can't tell me that.
Well, let me ask you just as we're talking about Live, just because you were just over at Bedminster for the Live event there, and of course, and I know you wrote a piece in the Post the other day about this new investor that's,
Yeah.
obviously, for just, I think our audience all knows this, but the PIF, the Saudi fund is, pulling their support, and so Live has been looking for a new investor. Allegedly, they found one. I'm not sure we know what the details are of the amount of money or anything like that. And obviously, Bryson is kind of front and center on a lot of this stuff. And I know you talked with him. Where are we with Live now? I mean, and where do you see it going?
Well, I'm not sure I can tell you where we are. I can barely tell you where I see it going, but I think where we are is actually more confusing just because, now it looks like this BC Partners is the investor that nobody wants to, that Scott O'Neill, the CEO of Live, has not wanted to name. But he was palling around with them all week, apparently the last couple of days, weekend at Trump Bedminster. So I think it's pretty clear. And But there's been reports that investor is not going to pump the money in unless the big guys stay. So that to me is that's the biggest question mark. What's Rom going to do? What's Bryson going to do? Now I had to sit down with Bryson on Thursday after his round, Thursday evening, at at Live, and he was pretty forthcoming. And I asked him that straight question because Bryson's contract is up after 26.
Right.
If we still lived, and this is the exact question I posed to Bryson, he answered as best he could, but I said if we were still in the Saudi PIF world financially, you re-upping, we're talking about probably a minimum of 500 or $600 million to stay. I mean, he signed for 300, I think, or whatever. I think Rom signed for reported 500-ish, whatever. I mean, Bryson's the biggest name biggest name there. I mean, he might not be playing the best out there, but he's the most popular. People want to see
Well,
him.
the YouTube channel alone, I mean, the
Exactly.
followers are
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
2.8 million followers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He has more followers than the PGA Tour, the entire PGA Tour has on their YouTube channel. Um, so I said to Bryson, I said, if we were in that world, you know, you're gonna walk away with another 600 million to stay. But now, the reported numbers that Scott O'Neill has been trying to seek from this investor has been reported between 250 and 350 million. Well, I mean that barely buys a bag of balls, for
Right. Exactly. Who's going
Bryson,
to pay out
right?
all these contracts?
And that's for one player, right? And not
Right.
not to mention, I mean, the purse yesterday was 30 million. The purse, I think next week or in 2 weeks in Indy is like 20 or 20-ish million. You can't sustain that, obviously. There was unrealistic money, but I said to Bryson, I go, what's going to keep you to stay? Is it your belief in making this work? Because I think Bryson does have a belief that he can make this work. Whether it's pie in the sky, I don't know. But his argument was that the players are going to be, they're really essentially the co-owners, right? They're the benefactors, but the problem is if they're the equity guys, but if they're equity in what? I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
we've
Right.
just watched the Saudis spend more than 5 or 6, it's reported between 5 and 6 billion dollars since this thing started in 22. So obviously it hasn't been making any money. There's nobody's in the black. So how, if you're an equity partner in the operation, equity in what? Now, Bryson believes that there will be equity down the line when they reel in the spending, if you will, right? And he believes in the stuff that has gone on in South Africa in Australia,
Australia was big. Yeah.
the
Right.
crowds they've
Right.
drawn. In the UK, right after the British Open, they had huge crowds there.
Yeah.
I mean, Live is not a bad product, Larry. I mean, if you go, like, I mean, and I wrote that in my column, if you're just going to go and there's the crowds aren't huge, at least certainly around here, so you can get right up on the ropes and see these guys close. It's a good product. It's not a bad product. People, I mean, the haters are just unbelievable to me about it. But the PGA Tour did a very good job of that, of weaponizing all of the freaking 9/11 people, with the whole Saudi thing. I mean, that was another strategy of theirs when Live came around that I think is deplorable. But I mean, that was basically their entire marketing campaign against Live was scaring up all these families of 9/11 victims and stuff like that. So, but we're beyond that now, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
but the question is Bryson really going to believe that he's going to make? And listen, Bryson also doesn't. He doesn't. I said to him, I said, you don't need another dime the rest of your life. I mean, how much is too much, kind of thing, right? But they don't look at it that way, of course. And obviously, their time is should be worth something anyway. And he's obviously extremely popular for a reason. Um, but where this goes, I mean, if I'm an investor, I'm not going to invest $350 million if Bryson and Rahm take off. Then, I mean, listen, all credit to Waco Neiman for winning his ninth live event. What's he done anywhere else?
Yeah.
You know,
Nothing.
now
Yeah.
he did, in fairness, he had a really good run at the US Open at Shinnecock after getting what a
Amazing with that penalty on that
terrible,
one
just
hole, that how well,
irresponsible, terrible penalty too, I
I
thought.
mean,
And
just unbelievable. I mean, he was right in there
yeah,
without
listen,
that penalty.
I'm not taking anything away from him as a player, but the bottom line is if Waco Neiman is at a tournament in the US, you're not getting 50,000 more customers through the gates to see Waco Neiman. That's just the
Right.
bottom line.
That's right.
That's the way it
That's
is.
right.
He's a wonderful player, and he's may well win a major down the line or more. Who knows? But um, yeah, I don't know where this is going to go. Rahm still has years left on his contract. I've read all the reports. I'm not a financial guy, as I like to say. I'm in the toy store. I'm not. I'm in the candy store, the toy store. I cover sports, right? But there's been reports that he's going to be shorted on some of his signing bonus money because the Saudis are going to pay him at a discount. Now, if I'm Rahm, I'm in court with the PIF, and saying let's pony up, man. That's why I came.
Right.
But
Right.
I don't know how that stuff works. I'm not a financial guy. I'm not a law person or anything like that. But I have a hard time believing, you know, that these guys are going to stick around if we're playing, we're playing tournaments for a quarter of the purse next year. I mean, the whole purpose, the whole reason they went to live was for the money. I mean, let's be honest. That's why they went. And now the money's dried up. And
Right.
now the tour has gotten this, these, SSG, and they've got a lot more money involved now, and they're for profit, and so now they're pumping. Before we know it, they're going to be pumping more money than Live was or is. Because Live doesn't have the Saudi money anymore. So I don't know where it's going to go. I don't want it not to work because I'm not a Live hater. I think it's a good product. I think there's a place for it. Um, I really listen. I'm a pie in the sky guy, Larry. I just wish I think these players should be able. They're independent contractors. They should play wherever the frick they want to play. That's the way I've felt all along. But it's become a power struggle, obviously between Live and the PGA Tour. And I just don't see any reason why a guy can't go play a couple Live events, or whatever. I mean, look. I mean, we're down a rabbit hole, but look at the whole situation that the tour has created now, where some of these national opens, like the Canadian Open, might not be one of the elevated events. And, the Canadian Open I mean, that's a great example. One of my best friends in the business, he works for the Toronto Sun, covers golf, the Toronto Sun, John McCarthy. Like that's a major up there in
For
Canada because
sure.
all the
Of
Canadian
course.
players come back. Connors, Pendrith, all those guys come.
Yeah. Yeah.
They all play up there, and if these guys are on the championship level, they're not going to be allowed to play at their
Right.
own. So something has to be done around there. So I just think there's so many damn qualifications and rules and regulations and all. I mean, I'm not a rule and regulation guy, as you might be able to tell from our conversation. Let them freaking play wherever the hell they want to play. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, let's and have at it.
I get it. Here, I'll get you out of here on this. Just kind of adjacent to what we've been talking about. You mentioned Brian Rolapp. I mean, I all of your NFL coverage, I'm sure you must have run across him and you're covering the NFL stuff for the Jets. He's now, our new running the show here on the PGA Tour. He's seems like a very thoughtful guy. Entirely new structure now that he's put on the table for 28. Some of it needs to be fleshed out a little bit, but basic outlines, two-tier structure, championship series, challenger series, as you just alluded to. If you're in the championship tier, you can't go play challenger events, hence your point about the Canadian Open. No smaller fields, no more of the no cut stuff that we had for some of the elevated
Yeah.
events. No sponsor exemptions. That's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
You know, let match play for the tour championship, which I think is personally would be very cool.
Mhm.
Particularly because I think you could sort of see a lot of if you get in these final events where you're seated now could be really important if we're going to, go off that for the match play. Anyways, I'll get you out on this. Any kind of thoughts on these? You've followed the tour for a long time. You're very knowledgeable. I'm just curious what your reactions are to what he's put on the table.
Yeah, I like Brian. I've met him. I didn't really know him at the NFL because he was in the offices. You don't really you don't hear about much about him in the offices other than Goodell. But he's obviously Goodell's right-hand man. He's got a guy working with him, a guy named Paul Hicks, who's really sharp, who also came from the NFL. Um, I like the things these guys are doing. I am still concerned about the middle class, that I referred to earlier. I'll give you an example. I belong to a club here in New Jersey called Suburban Golf Club. It's a Tillinghast course just outside of New York City in Jersey. And my head pro there is a guy named Mark McCormick. His son is Ryan McCormick, who plays on Corn Ferry. Ryan got his tour card about 2 years ago. Didn't play well. Didn't do well. Wasn't playing well. But you know, it's so hard for these guys to stay on because there were stretches where you would have like right U.S. Open being an example. If you didn't qualify for the U.S. Open, I think he went through qualifying, didn't get in. The week before the U.S. Open is a Memorial, which is an elevated event. The week after the U.S. Open is a Travelers Championship, which is an elevated event. So this is a guy that's got to go almost a month without playing a tournament to try to win points, win money, get some status. And so the tour, the Jay Monahan live reaction tour, so to speak, as I would
Yeah,
just put
that's
it,
a good way to
you know,
describe it.
that basically it absolutely snuffed out all of the middle class, so to speak, and made it impossible for these guys, to make a living, to maintain, and their status. So I'm still curious to see how this will all flesh out a little bit with Brian's new system. They want to make it a meritocracy, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm still unsure what's going to happen with the Corn Ferry. If we have the championship and the
Yeah, I
challenger,
know.
well, it
Yeah.
wasn't the Corn Ferry the challenger.
Yeah, right.
What is
Yeah.
it? I mean, I don't. You know what I mean? It's as it is. You've got, I mean, dozens of incredible players on Corn Ferry that could step into a PGA Tour event and win it tomorrow. That's
Sure.
how close the talent level is, and how deep the game is now. So I remain skeptical for that level of player. I'm kind of tired of everything just being about Scotty and Rory and listen, I love Scotty to death, and who doesn't like Rory? I mean, all that stuff, but it's all about these same rotation of names, and I I love golf. I'll throw you a great analogy about Live and the PGA Tour and why
Yeah.
Live was never going to work because I mean never going to work in terms of the competitive. There's no consequence to Live other than winning another $4 million for a guy that's already a multimillionaire at a Live. That's all winning a tournament on Live means. And then whereas on the PGA Tour you can have somebody who just had never won before. Even this Michael Brennan just won the other day
Yeah.
yesterday. So. Um, I remember early days of Live. There was on a same weekend, Charles Howell III, who I love to death. He was one of my favorite interviews in golf. Who's on Live now, from Augusta
Right.
native.
Right. Right.
Um, I'm not even sure I've written his name down since he's left Live. Went to Live, but that's here nor there. But Charles Howell won a Live tournament down in Mayakoba in Mexico. And I just happened to be home with the TV on. I was watching some of that. And then I'm also watching the PGA Tour was at the Honda, which was the Honda Classic, which changed obviously this year. I guess the Cognizant, right? So
Cognizant, yeah, right.
um, it was the Honda Classic, and it was Chris Kirk and Eric Cole were dueling it out down the stretch. Two guys
Laura
nobody.
Baugh's son, right? I mean,
Yes, yeah, exactly. But I mean, still,
Right,
two guys who you've never heard of before, unless you're
right,
an absolute PGA Tour savant.
right,
And these guys are dueling it out, and whatever was going to happen at the end of that tournament was going to change one or both of their lives. Certainly
yeah,
one of their lives, because
for
he was going to
sure,
get into the Masters. He was going to have
right.
tour status. Uh, Chris Kirk ended up winning that tournament, but Cole finishing second still got a lot of great status, and he's still playing a lot of big events now. He still continued to play really well.
He is, yeah,
Hasn't won, but it changed it. That weekend catapulted him to a certain level, right?
agreed,
Where he can
yeah,
now compete in some of the bigger events and have a chance to win more FedEx Cup points and all that stuff. And to me, that day, Charles Howell winning another $4 million, I mean, he's probably won 100 something million and he's barely won anything because he's always in these tournaments, right? He's always top tens. He's one of those cash machines. He's an ATM machine, right? And who gives a crap about what happened with that at that tournament? But yet I was riveted to watching that Chris Kirk, Eric Cole dueling it out down the stretch down in Florida on TV. And those stories are slowly going away with the way the
right.
PGA Tour has become formatted. The Jay Monahan, let's make the rich richer and keep them happy so they won't jump to live. And that screwed up to me, the whole ecosystem, which is the big word everybody likes to use, of the PGA Tour. So I hope that Rolapp doesn't lose that, and like I said, what's going to happen with Corn Ferry? If is that below the Challenger Series? Is it part of the Challenger Series? I'm not even sure. I haven't written a lot of stories about the machinations of it, and I don't think any of it is completely sealed as
Yeah, I
locked in
agree with
yet
that.
either, right? So, that's what I'll worry about a little bit is I like those stories. I like to write those stories. I like to watch those stories unfold. And so hopefully we don't lose those stories.
Yeah, that's great. And this has been great. I mean, I can tell you and I could talk for hours. We even touched the Ryder Cup and lots of other topics, but this has been great. And it'll be interesting to see what happens as we get towards 2028 and this new structure and stuff. Mark, thank you so much for the time today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Larry. We should play some golf one of these days with Sammy.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I mean, if you're out here, you got my contact information and
Yeah,
I got 12 months a year out here. So if you're out here for the LA Open or if you come out for any of the stuff, please let me know. I'd love to tee it up.
you guys are very spoiled. You get the 12 months a year out there and it's like 78 and sunny every day. And I'm
Yeah,
playing
it's
101,
it
101
doesn't
degree heat index here tomorrow.
it doesn't suck.
No, it does not. It's funny. While we were talking, Sam Farmer literally was buzzing my phone. I had the
Oh,
ringer.
that's hilarious.
Well,
Sam's the best.
he's probably checking to see if we connected or not. And here we
Sam's
are
the
chatting.
best. I
So,
appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate
all
it.
right.